Today being day 36 of the war, and this could be the biggest turning point in the war so far, because what is now being claimed as per Iranian media reports, they say that a US fighter jet has been shot down and its pilot has been captured. This is the biggest development that has now happened in the last 24 hours alone. Now, this is coming at a time where not just one, but there are reports of others as well. Another fighter jet seems to have crashed near the Strait of Hormuz, and the lone pilot seems to have been rescued. Now, this comes as American officials have launched as far as when it comes to having any information on the previous jet crash on the whereabouts of a certain missing pilot. Now, this seems to be the development that has now happened. And not just that, what are we looking at now? Two US UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters that were participating in the rescue mission for the downed F-15E fighter jet in southern Iran were also hit by gunfire. And this is coming in from the US officials that happened between the 3rd and the 4th of April. Now, the helicopters who were sent to the rescue of the crew were targeted by the Iranian forces. So not just when it comes to fighter jets that are now being hit by Iran, because this is what they have been claiming. They have also been claiming, initially they were, of a capture of a US pilot, a fighter jet pilot. But did that happen? Well, there are certain media reports that has been not, however, giving any confirmation to that effect. But as far as when it comes to at least two of these incidents that have been reported, there were then rescue operations that were launched. And in that rescue operation as well, that was targeted by Iranian forces. Two US choppers apparently were hit during rescue operations, and the US media seems to be citing official sources that helicopters were hit by Iranian fire, and the rescue mission also came under attack, and the downed pilot search has now turned risky for the US authorities as well. Mayank is joining us here on the broadcast. Mayank, the tables have turned. Good morning. Because this seems to be exactly what Iran has been looking forward to, having the upper hand as far as in this war is concerned, because if a US fighter jet pilot indeed is in their custody, then things will dramatically and drastically change for President Trump.
Right, dramatically and drastically. And when you count the days, which is 36 days, I mean, it falsifies every claim with which the war was initiated, Amita, and good morning to everyone, to you also. And if it is 36 days, that means capitulation word which was used initially for Iran regime has not taken place to any bit. Now, having said that, what you have described very aptly is the way rescue missions have become risky, which clarifies that the claims and counterclaims and multiple claims, repeated claims of saying that destruction of air defense, destruction of navy, destruction of air force of the Iran, I mean, whatever the way the operations have been since last 24 hours, in which not only F-15 has been brought down, a CSA, which is close support aircraft, A-10 has been brought down, it is turning the table. Or rather, if it is sending a message that things there won't be any let-up in the near future, and not in the terms of even diplomatic talks, if such kind of offensive missions will continue that side. Embarrassing would be the time when Iran releases the images of the pilot in captivity, and that would be a prisoner of war, dealt under the Geneva Convention. And if that comes out, that would be further embarrassing for the US, for the president who is saying that it won't affect the talks. And the president did not comment as far as rescue missions is concerned, which has also come under fire. Because when you see, which also means that airspace, the combat rescue mission was forced. The people involved, the forces involved, the combat elements involved were forced out of the airspace of Iran. I mean, which means the other point, the area in which the fighter F-15 has been brought down is full of jungles and is a mountainous terrain. Now, jungles make things even more difficult for a person to be located by this in surveillance term, in terms of radar seeking and all. It becomes difficult.
Yes.
Now, having said that, F-15 has served for a longer period as a mainstay of the US Air Force, and it remains one of the most sophisticated
Yes.
and in terms of technology, a very high technology aircraft of the US Air Force. That has been brought down. That, as we began with, it questions the very claims made by the US and Israel, saying that they have blunted,
Yes.
if not destroyed, in this
Yes.
case, the capabilities to launch
And
attacks
Mayank,
on
the
the...
irony is that such kind of retaliation, and very strategic and tactical retaliation is coming by Iran at a time when President Trump had said that in the coming 2 to 3 weeks, Iran is going to be hammered and bombed so much that they will bring it back to the Stone Age. Well, that seems to be the reality that seems to be hitting as far as United States of America and its administration is concerned, because that has been the development in the last 24 hours alone has taken place between, as far as the warring nations in West Asia. Let's in the meantime also talk about what the Iranian leaders have been saying and reacting, because right now, seemingly, they believe that they have the upper hand in this ongoing war. The Iranian parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf has now mocked the United States for brilliant no-strategy war. On a post on a social media handle after an American fighter jet was apparently shot down over southwestern Iran, Ghalibaf has also ridiculed President Trump for repeatedly claiming that Iran has been defeated in this war. Now, there has been a reaction coming in. What we are getting to know that in a brief phone conversation, President Trump apparently refused to discuss the specifics of the ongoing search and rescue efforts in Iran after an American jet was downed. And if today's events will be affected with any negotiations with Iran, the president said, no, not at all. It's war and we are in war. So what has happened in the last 36 days? Both sides unrelenting and have continued unabated as far as when it comes to their attacks are also concerned, Mayank, because it is not just, when it comes to the physical war of missiles and drones that are being used in this war. There is tactical operations, there is cyber operations, there is propaganda and misinformation as well that is being largely traded.
And also, as you rightly brought up, information warfare and the technical terms like hybrid warfare, grey zone warfare can be seen effectively in this case. But to bring back to the statement of Ghalibaf, now what happens, right in the beginning when we were reporting about the warfare, the way it had started, the claims were being made, there were two important aspects which were brought out by the White House talking about the aims and the goals of the entire warfare apart from the regime change was to destroy the military-industrial complex, manufacturing capability, defense manufacturing capability of Iran to such an extent, which goes to the second aim, which was that they are not able to help the proxies in the region, which could be Hezbollah, Hamas, or Houthis. Now, have they been achieved? By seeing the way the operations are being launched, maybe they would have been blunted to a bit, but not the way the claims have been made. So, and coming back to the warfare, which is technical warfare, electronic warfare, information warfare, now the images minded, the body bags have always been a political issue, major political issue as far as military in the US is concerned.
Yes.
Now, in this case, an image of a soldier in captivity, and that too in Iran, is going to embarrass, is going to change the mindset, is going to bring out a kind of a mindset change which will affect, because this warfare right now is at the political plank, at the geopolitical plank, at the economic plank. Now, if you see that, it is going to change the direction in so many ways. And people in US who support the president or doesn't support the president will be seeing those images in captivity, which are yet to come out. And
that will prove to be a big dent as far as when it comes to the popularity and the image of the United States of America is concerned, because this seems to be a certain climb down, Mayank, that was also being seen during President Trump's address to the nation, which he concluded 2 days back. But what has been said now, that as far as Iranian leadership is now concerned, they seems to be mocking as far as the leadership of the United States of America. Well, what does Ghalibaf say? That he says that after defeating Iran 37 times in a row, this brilliant no-war strategy war that they started has now been downgraded from the regime change, that is in quotes, and to, hey, can anyone find our pilots, please, with a sad emoji? Well, this seems to be a clear taunt that is now coming in from the Iranian leadership. Wow, what an incredible process and progress, and this is absolute geniuses. Because this is what President Trump has been claiming consistently, that a considerable, when it comes to the Iranian military, has been degraded as far as their air force is concerned. He says the Navy is down now, at the bottom of the sea, of the bottom of the ocean, and as far as the missile launchers and drone facilities are also concerned, they are also being destroyed by continuous strikes. Now let's take a look exactly what the IRGC commander has to say, because he says that any attack on Iran's bridges, power plants or energy infrastructure will prompt strikes not just on all US and Israeli assets in the region, but also on key holdings of US allies, host nations, even more harder, even more devastating than before. Now will strike US-Israeli energy, economic assets in the region, because Iran is now warning of a tit-for-tat response. If you attack us, if you attack our critical supply and energy facilities, then you are going to face 10 times worse than what you have done. So not just direct hits as it considers not just US, even when it comes to financial sector, we're looking at the oil and energy infrastructure. We're looking at even corporates now, which are now linked to the United States. Now it seems that US-Israel assets are in the crosshairs as allied nations are now also under energy and economic threats. And this has been on part of IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, which has now been saying that multiple strikes are possible. But there are several impact sites that have also been reported in central Israel, because Iran has been continuing with its ballistic missile retaliation with cluster warheads as well. This is even more damaging. And what has now been said, that in Israel, the warhead missile impact has been seen in central Israel at least. Ballistic strike that has hit urban areas, and several sites have been reported hit. Mayank, you've just returned from Israel. What has been as far as the areas as well? Because Israel also boasts of an Iron Dome, which they believe that it has over 85% efficiency. But as far as these missiles are concerned that are being hit by Iran, seem to have penetrated in some areas that has also caused destruction in Israel.
So while we were there, we were talking to the people from IDF also, Israel Defense Forces also, and they had accepted that there was breach in the umbrella, which is air defense umbrella, and breaches from the places like Dimona, Arad, Beit Shemesh. We went to those places and we had brought out the ground reports. The last was Beit Shemesh, wherein 2 conventional missiles, I mean they were ballistic missiles, but they were not cluster munitions. They had increased and had devastated an area of almost 150 meters. I mean, that was the expanse of the devastation there. Having said that, this is the kind of attack which has been carried out by Iranian side. And that's why we were talking about Ghalibaf, the way he is making statements. The second point I would like to bring out 2018 here, the claims made by the US president saying that he was not given he was not given fair chance by the mainline media to air his views, but he had used social media, including Twitter. Now today, the same Twitter is being used by Ghalibaf to counter things for them in so many ways. So it is getting interesting that how multi-layered communication, which was used by the US president, has also been used by the other side to counter the claims or to bring out their claims. Now, having said that, military capabilities, let's come back to that point. Iran, even after the multiple claims like devastation of their air defenses, their defenses, the seekers, which is like radars and all, there had been so many embarrassing moments wherein they had been able to hit precisely.
And clearly when it comes to the objectives, Mayank, apologies for interrupting you, because it is clearly different when it comes to what objectives that US seems to be following, and there is a stark difference on the objective which Israel also seems to be following. So what really happens in the coming 2 to 3 weeks, that will underline exactly what is the future core of this war, because Iran on this other side has been showing no signs of backing down at all. Because what has been Iran's biggest weapon till now? Is it missiles? Is it what the nuclear facilities which US says that it has been obliterated? Or is it as far as the defense forces is concerned? The biggest weapon for Iran seems to have now been the Strait of Hormuz, which it has been effectively using not just against the US, but against the allies of the United States of America as well. And it has effectively turned into a global problem. What are we now looking at? One of the world's most critical energy lifelines in a geopolitical flashpoint, even with those countries who've got nothing to do in this war, have been dragged indirectly because of the blockade that Iran has imposed on the Strait of Hormuz. With strong rhetoric coming from Washington and a clear push for diplomacy from France as well, the divide in approach is now becoming even more pronounced. President Trump has now ramped up his rhetoric on the Strait of Hormuz, suggesting with a little more time, the passage could be opened and its oil resources tapped for major economic gains. But in a striking set of remarks, President Trump says that US could easily open Hormuz. Well, what was it doing in the last 36 days? Take the oil and make the fortune. Is he expecting to pull off a Venezuela also in Iran and also turn it into what he has described as a gusher for the world? Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has now taken a completely contrasting stance on the Strait of Hormuz, backing diplomacy over military action amid rising tensions. He says that using force to reopen the strait would be unrealistic, and he has warned that it could expose naval forces to serious risk from Iran's capabilities. Where the President of France has also stressed the need for consistency and coordination, maintaining that dialogue is the only viable path forward, and reopening of the strait would require cooperation with Iran. Speaking in South Korea, he has reiterated calling for a de-escalation and a diplomatic approach, where South Korea too, Seoul too, has been impacted because of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
Nous avons abordé la crise au Moyen-Orient, les conditions d'un processus de désescalade et les conditions dans un cadre international clairement établi, une déconfliction étant négociée avec l'Iran, d'une réouverture du détroit d'Ormuz. Nous avons également défendu la paix juste et durable et le respect du droit international, et je veux dire notre convergence de vues, qu'il s'agisse de l'Ukraine face à la guerre d'agression russe, ou qu'il s'agisse aussi de la paix et de la stabilité dans la péninsule coréenne. C'est la même vision que nous défendons.
So after those comments from the French president, it looks like France has made its way, on Iran's good side, on its good books, as a French-owned vessel has also crossed the Strait of Hormuz, marking a notable development amid the ongoing tensions. And we have seen the kind of commentary has come in from President Trump that seems to be directed towards the French president. Now the ship, Kribi, that completed its transit on the 2nd of April has become the first French vessel to pass through the route since this conflict began around 36 days ago. So what are we now looking at? How is it now benefiting France? And as far as when it comes to the first European nation as well to get its vessel safely out of the Strait of Hormuz, because it's seen dramatic shift in traffic since the outbreak of the conflict. And before the war, around what is being said, 20 to 30 oil tankers are crossed on a daily basis. 20% of the global supply passes through this very narrow stretch. And what are we looking at? As far as when it comes to the after the war, near zero, very limited involvement of movement that what we are looking at. Even when it comes to Indian vessels as well, it did take a significant amount of time and diplomacy that was at play at different levels as well when it comes to the safe passage. But there are still several Indian tankers that are stranded at the Persian Gulf. Now, this seems to be, as far as what Iran has been doing, weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz, effectively doing so, where in the last 1 month, President of the United States of America seems to be giving varying statements over when it comes to reopening the Strait of Hormuz. However, that hasn't effectively happened so. Now, in the meantime, let's also talk about what the US intel seems to be flagging. As far as US intel says that Iran's Strait of Hormuz strategy has been reporting that Iran will not ease the strait control. And according to reports, Strait of Hormuz has been used as a key leverage where Iran has now tasted power and it will not back down. All right, Mr. Prabhudyal is connected with us. Sir, good morning to you. Iran has now effectively blocked the Strait of Hormuz. Whatever President Trump seems to be now saying, because he's now shifted the responsibility as far as to other nations are concerned who have been affected with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. But what are you looking at as far as global oil markets that continue to remain under pressure, sir?
Well, certainly the global oil markets are very badly affected because, as you pointed out, about 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran has made it very clear that it will only allow the ships of friendly countries to pass through. Now, very interestingly, on the 2nd of April, a Malta-flagged container ship owned by the French shipping giant, which is called the CMA GGM, became the first vessel tied to Western Europe to transit the Strait of Hormuz since the conflict began in late February. Now, the passage is seen as a significant diplomatic development, signaling that Iran may no longer categorize France as a hostile nation. So this is a very significant diplomatic development. And let me mention that along with the French ship, several other friendly vessels also made the crossing, including 3 Omani-operated tankers and the first Japanese-linked vessel to exit the Gulf since the war started. So in the political context, this transit occurred amid sharp public agreements between French President Emmanuel Macron and the US President Donald Trump. Macron has called a military operation to reopen the strait unrealistic, advocating instead for diplomatic engagement with Tehran. And Trump has criticized France for lack of military support and has repeatedly stated that nations receiving oil through the strait must take care of that passage. So there is a widening gap between the positions of Donald Trump and some of his close Western allies. But significantly, even the slight opening of the Strait of Hormuz is something that should give a sigh of relief. But nonetheless, by and large, the strait remains closed from what I can make out.
Well, that seems to be an effective weapon, Mr. Dayal, that Iran seems to have used. But France seems to be now stressing on diplomacy and talks, not forcing over the Strait of Hormuz, when it comes to President Trump, because he seems to be washing off his hands of any responsibility to take control over the Strait of Hormuz. However, that has contradicted his previous statements. Thank you very much, Mr. Dayal. Appreciate you joining us here on the broadcast. Let's, in the meantime, talk about the oil corridors, because that seems to be, as we talk about when it comes to this narrow stretch, what is now that the Gulf is now seeking when it comes to the new oil corridors? What are the options really when it comes to the other countries who have also been, mainly when it comes to the oil and energy producers, have also been impacted greatly when it comes to this war? So let's take a look as far as option 1 is concerned. Another alternative is the Saudi pipeline. Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline to the Red Sea. However, this is going to be a longer route, will require more resources. We are looking at more money, and the distance also will also go up. Israel-Europe route, possible Gulf-Mediterranean link via Haifa port. That seems to be another option. And option 3 is IMEC, which is India, Middle East, Europe corridor, that seems to have also gained a lot of traction, because this seems to be the very idea of how Europe is now linked to Asia, and in this such a way that this seems to be more of these options, because these potential routes that we are now looking at may open certain ways for finding an alternative, which may prove to be effective in the long run for all of the countries that have been impacted and are not solely dependent on the Strait of Hormuz for their global oil supply chain. We're going to be heading into a very short break. You're watching Times Now. Back with more developments.